The U.S. presidential debate took place overnight and it was feisty. Kamala Harris successfully goaded Donald Trump as the two sparred over foreign policy, the economy, and abortion. The vice president told Trump to his face that world leaders are laughing at him. She even went after Trump's rallies and took aim at his policies, which led to the overturning of federal abortion rights. The former president, meanwhile, repeated conspiracy theories, including that immigrants are eating pets.
Before an acrimonious debate, a moment of civility. Presidential candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump shook hands as they met for the first time. Soon after, the candidates traded barbs on abortion, a strong topic for Harris. She lambasted Trump for appointing Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022, removing federal protections for abortion.
Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. They don't want that.
Trump's running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, has been saying that Trump would sign a nationwide ban on abortion, which Harris pounced on. Trump, however, denied that he would do so, not because he was against it, but because Congress wouldn't be able to approve it. As the debate wore on, Trump tried to turn questions on multiple topics into a discussion about immigration, including false claims about immigrants eating cats and dogs in Ohio. Nonetheless, the moderators managed to keep the conversation on track, moving on to foreign policy. Harris said autocrats and dictators are rooting for Trump, criticizing Trump's assertion that he could end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, as meaning he would give Ukraine to Russia. Trump spun his closeness to Russian President Vladimir Putin as a positive.
I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden.
After the program, both teams declared victory. The Harris campaign signaled that they wanted another debate, which the Trump campaign has not yet agreed to.
We can now bring in Peter Trubowitz, Professor of International Relations and Director of the Phelan U.S. Center at LSE and Associate Fellow at Chatham House. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. Back in June, when Donald Trump and Joe Biden went head-to-head, Trump could have essentially stayed silent and he would have won that debate. Last night, he was up against a 59-year-old vice president who was also a former prosecutor. Did Kamala Harris succeed in getting under Donald Trump's skin?
Clearly, I think Democrats are breathing a sigh of relief today. She had a very good night, likely convinced many of those voters who are on the fence, that we call persuadable voters in the U.S., to vote for her in November. She came across as calm, I thought, confident. Trump, by contrast, came across as angry and confused, and partly because it was Harris's strategy. It's pretty clear, was to try to get under his skin by raising doubts about crowd size at his rallies, his commitment to women's reproductive rights, and Trump's overall fitness to serve as another 4 year, for another 4 years as president. And it basically seemed to work. I mean, if I'm Harris's campaign advisor, frankly, I'm feeling pretty good about last night's debate in Philadelphia.
You mentioned about swaying people. Donald Trump last night repeated falsehoods, things like Democrats want abortions after a baby is born, which would not be an abortion, it would be murder, wouldn't it? Then he also went on about saying how immigrants were eating cats and dogs. If this debate was really about swaying people sitting on the fence, would anyone sway to Donald Trump's side?
It's hard to say, because you don't know. If it were based on the substance, probably not, but there's emotional affect, and one doesn't know how that registers. I mean, I think we're going to have to wait a few days to see whether the debate moved the proverbial needle when we see the polling numbers. But I think it's pretty clear that Harris's campaign will get a boost at this moment. I mean, this is a moment where the sugar high that the campaign was on from the convention basically seems to be wearing off, or, when you were looking at polls over the last week or two, they seemed to start to kind of like she had hit the flat of the curve. And so I think many voters last night, these persuadable voters, were looking at the debate to get a better fix on who she actually is and whether she's up to the job. But it's worth saying here, I think, there's a lot of road left between now and the election, election day on November 5th. And given the closeness of the race, I don't think anything is guaranteed. It's worth remembering that most Americans, if you go back and you look at it, most Americans thought Hillary Clinton won her debates against Donald Trump in 2016, and she went down to defeat. It's a highly polarized country. This is a very close race. I don't think anything can be taken for granted.
Now, Peter, clearly the economy is a hot button issue voters will obviously be weighing. Inflation is a problem in America. And I want to ask, did Kamala Harris manage to do the difficult task of taking credit for Joe Biden's policies, but at the same time distancing herself from the current problems that people are facing, like the cost of living crisis?
It's a great question, and we don't know the answer to that, to be perfectly honest. It would seem when you look at when you look at the comparison between her and Trump over, let's say, the last month or roughly month and a half, he was judged very early on to be much stronger on the economy. She has closed that by like some 25 points. She closed that before this debate to around, give or take, 10 points. So I think the question is whether last night she convinced enough people, more people, that it would be a good steward of the economy, that she put enough distance between herself and Joe Biden on this question. I think we're just going to have to wait until we see the polling numbers. But I think you're absolutely right to be focusing on the economy. The election, to the extent that there's an issue defining this election, it's the economy.
Peter, I'm not sure if you're a fan of Taylor Swift or not, but you clearly know the importance this singer has over in the United States. After the debate last night, she weighed in and said she was behind Harris and Walz. What impact will that have, do you think?
In general, having celebrities endorse you does not make a huge difference. This one might be an exception. I think she has 280 million followers on Instagram. I think it's worth noting here, Trump has worked very hard, has asked for her endorsement, that is Taylor Swift's endorsement, a number of times, and he's even claimed that he had her endorsement. So I think the candidates believe that this is valuable. The timing of it was really quite noticeable, to come out immediately after the debate and also to sign off the way she did as a complete pushback against J.D. Vance.
Indeed, Peter Trubowitz, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the program today.
Good to be with you. Thank you.